Hey everyone. So last week I took you through how I made an entire pirate-themed survival beat-em-up game. This week I've been working on this steampunk platformer. And today's game is definitely going to be a lot more complex than what you saw last week. We're not just dealing with a single scene. We now have scrolling scenes as well as full parallax backgrounds. We have cutscenes as well. And as you can see over here, we have full gameplay animations for every single enemy, as well as the UI elements that you see on screen. And all of these animations that you see here, all of these were AI generated. So in today's video, I'll be walking you through the entire process that I took, including all of the prompts and the workflows that I did to get to this end state. One of the biggest changes in my workflow is making use of Grok Imagine to create these animations for our art assets. There are a lot of additional game development tools inbuilt into this that helps me to integrate all of my art assets into the gameplay so that we have a complete product. So if you've ever wanted to know how to make your very own platformer with your own custom sprites and animations, this video is for you. Alright, so before we jump in today, I've made this entire cheat sheet along with several other resources that I use to build this game for free. These include things such as the prompt templates that I use for each of these steps, as well as the source code of how I set up this character gym that you see over here. And if you want to dive even deeper into AI-powered game development, you can check out gamedev.com. This is everything you need for your game development journey, including specialized game development agent skills, which I always use to build games like what you see today. It also includes full step-by-step tutorials and the full source code of several of the projects that I've been working on as part of this channel. So this includes today's one as well. So you'll be able to see things like the Tilemap element editor, the enemy gym, as well as the full level editor that I've used for today's game. But beyond the tutorials and resources, there's also a private exclusive Discord where you can join the community of vibe coding game developers who hang out together, sharing tips and tricks about their workflows and their own projects while engaging with one another. Now, on the topic of engaging with the community members, this is only made possible thanks to the power of N8N, who are the kind sponsors of today's video. In my opinion, nothing comes close to N8N when it comes to running automations based on the data that is being sent through my services and my backend. So in gamedev.com, everybody that joins will be able to answer a questionnaire that you see over here. This questionnaire helps me to understand what people are looking to get out of gamedev.com, as well as their existing experience with game development, AI tools, and what their biggest game inspirations are. Whenever somebody submits a questionnaire like this gets stored in a convex database. But rather than having to query this manually, what I have here is a very simple automation. So the moment somebody submits this, it goes into my convex database. But then you can see over here, I have this fire questionnaire webhook that will automatically take whatever the response is, go through to N8N, and then send me a Telegram message. And because I receive this in real time, I'm able to look very quickly at what people are looking to build. I can then send an email to them asking for more information or providing additional guidance so that I can help them along their game dev journey. The best thing about N8N is that you can see every single run that has run, and this is especially useful if you need to look at any errors that have occurred. You can very easily jump into it, and then most of the time I just copy and paste this error straight into Cloud Code or Codex, and it's able to fix the issue for me. I've been using N8N to power a lot of what goes on at gamedev.com, and you should definitely check it out for yourself today. Link is in the description, and you can get started with integrating it into your apps today. All right, so without further ado, let's get back into today's tutorial. All right, so let's get started with how I built this game that you see over here. And just an overview of the key features of this game. I'm just going to jump into this playground here, and I'm going to turn up the sound and music a little bit. You can see. Okay. So that's the key loop of the game, right? You are supposed to get to this exit, and you can see that as part of the main game, you will also need to be picking up these little gear icons as well. This game that you see here was really a chance for me to put a lot of what I've been talking about in my other videos into practice. I'm going to go through everything with you today. All right, so just to start with, I wanted to mention that you can use any of the popular AI tools to accomplish what I've done here today. The main thing is that you will be doing a lot of image generation. So if you're using Codex, this comes along with it. But don't worry, if you prefer Cloud Code, Cursor, or Anti-Gravity, you can also make use of external image generation sources, such as Fel.ai. So for this game that I made, I actually made use of Cloud Code, Codex, as well as Cursor. So this is just proof that you can get away with using any of these tools. So the first thing I always like to do is I always like to go for a visual target. And you can see here, I have 4 different concept art that was generated as part of my exploration into the kind of game that I wanted. And so what I usually do is that I just look through them, get some inspiration in terms of different kinds of gameplay. So just to scroll through here, you can see this one was a little bit too low fidelity for my liking. This one was nice as well, had the essence of what I wanted with all this steampunk-esque rubbish. But ultimately, I landed on this one that you have over here because I felt that it gave a really good sense of the direction that I wanted to go for. So once you have a visual target, so that's what I always encourage people to do at the very beginning is to just play around with your AI, ask it to generate several different mockups. And as part of it, you want to pass in some constraints, right? These initial ones were very busy. Like you can see, this looks really interesting, but it doesn't really feel like a game, right? Whereas these ones start to look more like in-game screenshots. That's the reason why you can see that I continue to prompt it to say, I want it to be less busy and I want it to be more game-like. Now, one of the things that I also included as part of this is Parallax background. Let me show you what Parallax background is. As I'm walking or running, you can see the background moves at a different pace. This gives you a sense of depth and is a really useful trick to improve the visual fidelity of your game. I deliberately ask it to think about the fact that it would have parallax layers in the background. And if you actually look at it over here, it started to incorporate that into the mockups as well. So there's one that's very far in the background, then there's the trees that you have in the middle, and then you have your main game layer over here. So what I did was that I created a background test and I just prompted the AI to lay down the 3 different images and scroll them at different speeds. So if I remove them here, you can see there's a sky base, and then there's something that's far away moving at a certain speed, and then there's another one in the middle range that moves at yet a different speed. Once you have these different speeds, it gives you this sense of that and makes your game look a lot more interesting. Now, let me tell you a mistake that I make. From this visual target, I told the AI to give me 3 different layers, and there's a problem with this. Now, this looks really good at first glance, right? But the problem with this is that the nearmost layer is too distinct. It's going to be really hard for you to discern what is making up the background and what is making up the game. That's the reason why I reprompted to say, make sure that whatever layers you end up choosing, it never has colors that would then conflict with the game itself. Now you can see that the colors of the main game area are a lot more distinct. You know that that's playable. This is something that you can pick up, and everything else layers up into the background and doesn't interfere with the main core gameplay itself. So if you are ever doing parallax layers, always remember, you should never make it too crisp. It should not compete with your main game platforms, enemies, and your character. So that was the first thing that I learned. The next thing that I did was I got my player character into the game. For example, these assets will appear in-game as sprite sheets. Every single frame is animated. Once you do that, you will be able to get full animations within your game itself. I will walk you through the process here so that you know how to do it. And if you want to go into more detail, definitely check out my other video about generating AI assets. Now, the first thing that I always do is I always generate a concept art front-facing at as high a resolution as possible. Usually, I would pass in this in-game concept so that it will maintain some of the key features of what I want. And I always say that it needs to be neutral, facing the camera, stable silhouette, and it needs to be readable at game scale. But once you've had that input image, use this image and say you want a game-ready version of this against a chroma green background so that you can later remove the background for transparency. The other thing that you want to do is that you want to do pixel snapping. So pixel snapping, it helps you make your generated art have real pixels. And the reason for that is that AI models do not really generate real pixel art. They generate something that spoofs pixel art, but when you start to zoom in, you will start to see a lot of blurry edges and things that do not make up real pixel art. For my in-game reference image, I always like to snap it so that you get clean, crisp lines. And the good thing as well is that it will become infinitely scalable. Finally, the last thing that I do is that I generate a west-facing character because we are making a platformer and we can flip this horizontally for the right-facing one. So that's pretty much the first portion of getting your art ready. At this point, in order to get this into sprite sheets, you can do it in 2 ways. One way is to ask your image generator, whether it's GPT Images 2.0 or Nano Banana 2, you can just say, create a sprite sheet for me, for idle, for walk, for attack, and it will be able to get you somewhere there. However, with image generation, you will have 2 main problems. The first one is that most of the time, you will need to split up, the generated sprite sheets will not have evenly spaced out frames, so you will need to cut it up and re-anchor things so that you don't have drift between the frames. And the other problem is that it just does not do walk cycles at all. It works fairly well with things like death and attack, but you will have a lot of problems when you come to things like running and walking. So the other thing I always recommend people to do is to make use of video generation to generate these videos And then you go ahead and split up the frames, remove the backgrounds, and then you stitch it up. Now, the next thing that I always like to do, and if you look at the game that I made, is that I like to have several gyms. And when I'm talking about gyms, these are effectively single scene playgrounds where you can analyze the output of your AI so that you can make any corrections needed. The first gym that you want to have is something for your character. Okay, this is my character gym, and let me walk you through what's available over here. Now, the very first thing is that you want to be able to cycle through any of the animations that you have, because this is where you will be able to see whether or not any of your animations are too small, they don't really sync up well, or is incomplete. Okay. The next thing that you want to do is you want to be able to visualize the bounds of the character. The main thing that you want to focus on are the collision bounds and the attack bounds. If you look over here, you can see for this character, there's a lot of this empty space around it. Okay. That's the gray box that you see over here. But you don't want the collision to be based on that. You want the collision to be based on the character within the frame. So that's the reason why you want to adjust the bounds. For example, let me just move the bounds a little bit lower, and I'm just going to save this. Okay. And then I'm just going to load it up within the game so that you can see. Now you can see my character is just floating above the ground, and that's not a good look. So this is the reason why you want to have a character gym, because this will allow you to make sure that your bounds are correct. So what I'll do here is that I'll say, actually, I need this to be a bit higher so that when the player enters the game, he doesn't look like he's floating above the ground. He looks like he's standing on the ground as well. Okay. So that's one thing. The next thing is the attack bounds. Now, I've seen this in my last video when I did the pirate beat 'em up game, but effectively, if you're doing an attack like this where you're punching, I'm just going to slow things down a little bit so you can see here. So if you're doing things where you're punching, you want to show which area needs to be colliding with the enemy in order for the punch to register. Because if you have the whole frame, it just looks very weird. If only the legs overlapping with the character, it will still register as a hit, and that's not great. The second thing that you always want to do is to choose which of these frames actually registers as a hit. I only want frame 5 and 6 to register as a hit because that's the point where his hand is fully extended. Let me show you what it looks like if I don't do that. I'm going to jump back into this. Even before my hand is raised, the scavenger is falling back. And that's the effect when you do not have properly associated frames for your attacks. Okay, so I'm going to go back in here. I'm going to slow this down. It's at frame 5 and frame 6 where the hand's extended, and that's where I want it to register. And so I save that configuration so that this will work. Okay, so that's what I do for characters. And this is what I've been doing for almost all my projects now. The main things you want are your collision bounds, your attack bounds, and you want to make sure that you have activated frames for your attacks so that you will be able to register it and it looks correct. Okay, so that's how you do the character. The other thing that I always tend to do is that I tend to have a playground gym where I can then check to make sure that my character actually plays correctly according to the direction that I'm moving, the attack runs correctly, and everything else is working fine. So that's how I ensure that my character is right. So the next thing that I'm going to talk about is how to get the level set up in this way. If you recall, all we've had at this point is effectively the mockup, the parallax background, the character, but now it's time for us to be able to create the elements within the game so that the character has places to step on. So that's what we'll talk about next. Now we're going to talk to you about how I got some of these props into the game, such as these gear icons that you can pick up, the house that you see over here, as well as all of the different platforms. So the way that you want to do is that you want to prompt your AI to effectively create something called an atlas, where it will put all of the different art elements that make up the level into a single image, because you don't want to have too many individual images. It's not the most efficient. You want to just have a single large atlas like you have over here, and then it will automatically be able to crop out whichever element that it needs. All right, so you can see here, I use 2 prompts, and the first thing that I did was that I said, all right, let's focus on the main game layer. As you might recall, we've already finished the parallax layers over here. So now we need to focus on the main game layer. We want to have the player jump on stuff. I said, based on the mockup, which is the input image that we had over here, all right, create a chroma-backed atlas that has sufficient elements to have a basic level with good amount of variation of ground platforms, etc., etc. All right. And I did say that I wanted to ensure that it creates an associated JSON file. And this is important for us because you have a single file. I need to know exactly which portion of this atlas corresponds to which image. This was an example of something that was generated and then with the chroma removed. And so it looks really good because now it has a transparent background so that it can be put into the game. Now, one of the things is that I did say to split it between platforming elements as well as props and pickups. This allows us to have a separation between platforming elements as well as things that would serve more as things that sit in the background. And this allows you to have something like you see over here. So you can see these like ferns, bushes, and this lump of trash. Those are props. And then this lamppost as well. And then you can see the pickups that you see over there. Okay, so I think that's just good practice to keep your elements into different atlases because this allows you to have a little bit more organization. Now, once you've done something like this, you will need to create a new gym. So much like how you needed a character gym that you see over here, it's important to now have an element editor gym. And the reason for this is that you had exactly the same problems that you saw with the character. So what this gym does is that it just lays out the background and all that kind of stuff. But the most important thing here is that you want to start aligning things correctly. So a lot of times, the bounds that you see over here will not be aligned element correctly. So for example, a lot of them will end up looking a little bit like this. So the moment you have something like this, your character is going to look like it's floating above the platform. And that's not what you want. So not only do you have to fix the character's bounds, you also need to fix the collision bounds of the platform. And this is a really important step. Let me show you what happens if you get this wrong. Let me go into this character playground and I have this assets label toggle. This tells me exactly which assets are being used so that I can see what's going on. Let's take a look at this here. Ground long mossy wall. If I jump into my element editor and I go to ground long mossy wall, which is this one, and I think this is how it looked like previously. I'm going to save this. I'm just going to show you what happens now. If I go in the playground here, everything is just off now because the collision boundaries are not right. This one looks correct, but this platform over here doesn't look correct at all. So I know that I need to go into my element editor and then I have to go back to this and I have to just adjust this back, right? So I'm just going to shift this back up and you want to have a little bit of grass at the top. So if I save this and now if I jump back into my playground, you can see this looks a lot better. All right, so this is what your element editor is meant to look like. And what you also want to do as part of all of these editors that you may have is say that you want to save this out into a JSON file so that you can persist it on your local drive so that it loads it up each time. Otherwise, you might save it into just a browser session and it will not persist when you deploy this game. Okay, so that's how you do the elements. All right, so now that you've got your elements, you actually have enough to go ahead and create a game level. And that's exactly what this playground is. So the main thing that you want to do over here is just tell your AI to start to put together a single screen playground level. So there's no need for any of the parallax or whatever. You just want to start to put elements so that your character is not just jumping around on a blank screen, but is actually going to be able to collide with the elements so that you can ensure that everything looks right. The next thing that you want to do is to persist the levels that you have. And this is where I went ahead and created a level editor. So let me just show you this level editor here and let me just pull up the playground. Okay, so this is the playground level that you saw. And this is something that you can just tell your AI to do because it's really good at doing it. There's just a couple of things that you want to have in your level editor. Now, the first thing that you can see here is that you want to be able to have these things called gizmos. So just prompt your AI to add gizmos on top and you can say something like Blender or Unity or Unreal. This allows you to move things along the axis. And you can still move things freely if you want to. And that's the main thing when you create another editor. You want to be able to switch between the different types. So in this case, I want to put a lantern. So you can see I have a lantern over here. And maybe I can just put it over here. And then as what I did before, if you click save, this will actually save this into a level.json file. So now if we go into our playground level, you can see that the lantern is appearing over there. Okay, so that's effectively what you want to be able to have. And then with this, I use the same level editor to do all of the different main game levels as well. So you can see here, this is the first run. So let's just try to add something else over here. And so we have some fencing. So I'm just going to pop this over here like that. Okay, and I'm going to save it. And I probably should have a preview in here so that I can actually preview what I'm adding. But it's a feature for next time. If I replay this, I click on play and I go to first run, you can see that the fence is added into the game. So this is very simple, but it's really useful to have. And as always, you want to ask your AI to save these levels as JSON files. So you can see I've been modifying these as I've been working on this video, and it's added all of the things into these JSON files. So you can actually save it and then share your levels or do whatever you want to do with it. It's always good practice so that you have a good representation of your levels and it's not just hard-coded within the game. So now we actually have everything to stitch together a game already, right? So we have the levels, we have the player, we are able to get into the game. You can very easily add in the props and you can add in the pickups as well. And so the next thing that we should be focusing on is how I actually went ahead and added in these two enemies into the game. Okay, so let's talk about these enemies that I added in over here. So I just told the AI to come up with a good line of enemies and it generated these prompts for the different enemy types that it had. And you can see that this was the lineup that it came up with. So I decided to pick this first and last one because I wanted something that was a little bit more humanoid, and then I wanted something that was a little bit more static. That's how I got the concept art for these enemies that you see over here. And then you go ahead and create a chroma back version of it that is more game-like. Snap it so that the pixels are right, and then you just scale it up so that you have an anchor that's ready to be animated. So you can see that I did the same thing over here. I had a reference image and then just got it to look in a neutral direction facing forward, and then pixel snap it and then scaled it up. Okay, you pretty much just go through the same steps that you see over here. So once you've gotten your west facing, then you just go ahead and use either your image generation sprite sheets or your video generation. And one thing to highlight here, all of these animations that you see here were created using Grok Imagine. Based on my experiment so far, Grok Imagine is really good for creating animation suitable for game sprite sheets as long as you use the correct parameters. And I'll explain to you why I find it really good. The first thing is that Grok Imagine allows you to set the duration of the animations that you generate. And that's really useful because if you leave your animations for too long, so for example, this 6-second one that you see over here, it's very cool, right? But there's just too much going on and you realize that you have to clean up a lot of stuff. So my suggestion, which I've seen from others who work with Grok Imagine, is that keep it to 1 second. The most you want to have is 2 seconds, but try to keep it 1 second and below. You have less drift in the consistency and weird stuff going on and movement. If you just keep it 1 to 2 seconds, you will end up having great looking animations. I'm just going to jump into the enemy gym here. So it's very similar to the character gym, but the main thing that you can see is like every single one of these animations that you see over here, these were all generated using Grok Imagine. Because it's using video generation, it ends up being very consistent already within the frame, and you don't have to go through the trouble of selecting frames, dropping frames, and shifting things around. They tend to already look great, and they are already consistent, and it just saves you a lot of time because you don't have to do as much of a cleanup. So this is an example of an attack that was done using image generation, and I had to go through and pick the frames that I wanted because there was a lot of additional stuff and it wasn't a smooth motion. Whereas if you use Grok Imagine, you can see this punch just looks a lot smoother compared to what I had previously. And the good thing about Grok Imagine is that when you keep it to 1 second, it doesn't cost as much. Let me just take a look at how much it costs over here. It costs about 7 cents, right? 7.2 cents, which isn't too bad considering that it's actually ready for integration, right? You can just split the frames and use this pretty much straight away into your game. So that's actually really cheap compared to a lot of the other image generation models that you might be using. And so with the enemies, the main thing is that I wanted to have a radius. So this, you can see this yellow radius over here. That's the detection distance for the cannon. So if I'm within it, it will then start shooting, and I want to be able to adjust it. So you can see I can adjust the range. So in this case, I have to get nearer before it starts shooting at me. You can increase the HP of the turret as well, and then you can have different cooldowns. So you can increase the cooldown so after it fires, it waits longer before it starts shooting. So you can see here 3.5 seconds before it shoots again. And this one, you can see this is shooting super rapidly over here. And then this is a bit more decent. Okay, I'm going to just hide this for a second. You can see for the scavenger, I can change the speed of its patrol. I can change where it detects whether I'm present. And then the chase speed can also be adjusted. So you can see it's going to chase me a lot faster now. These are the kind of things that you want to have within your game. It's useful to be able to save all these configs so that they will persist throughout your entire game. So that's all about enemies. And now I'm just going to talk to you through a couple of final things that you will find quite useful when you're bytecoding games. So as you can see over here in the top left hand corner, this entire health bar here was generated using AI as well. And this is actually quite easy to accomplish as well. So what you can do is you can just rely on any image generation to do this. This is the actual prompt that was generated by the AI. I just said that I wanted to have a HUD UI display for the health. I wanted it to have a portrait of the character, and I wanted it to have an area where I could put my health bar. And the reason why you want to have the chroma key is so that there's a transparent area so that you can dynamically fill and unfill. The way that you do this is that you say you want to have a transparent area filled with chroma so that you can set it as a mask with the health within here. And then finally, I added a few other things, such as whenever I pick up my pickups, I wanted to tween the pickups towards the scoreboard. And you can see that's what happens. So it gives it a nice effect. And this little bit of polish is quite useful. One of the things that I wanted to do this time was to make sure that I had a nice splash screen. So when you start the game, you have this splash screen over here. This one was very simple to do. All I did was I just used image generation and I said, using the art assets that I have and the theme of my game, I wanted you to create a splash screen image for me. Now, one of the things that you want to do is that if you don't want it to end up creating a mockup like this, which is what it came up with initially, always say that you want this stylized to be more like a poster art as opposed to it looking like in-game. That's quite important. You can see here, this is pretty good, but it still wasn't what I wanted. This one was a lot more posterly, splash screen-like, and that's what I used for the game in the end. All right, so that's it for today's video. I hope that it's been informative. I actually had a lot of fun making this. I tried to incorporate a lot of questions that people had from my other videos, things like how to do UI, how to use other models, as well as how to create parallax backgrounds. So if you'd like to learn more about something that I haven't covered, please let me know in the comments. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Give it a like, hit that subscribe button, and don't forget to turn on notifications so that you'll always be the first to know when new content like this drops. Now, if you haven't seen my previous video of how to build using AI a pirate beat 'em up survival game from start to finish without writing a single line of code, where I walk through step by step, prompt by prompt, including collisions, polish, screen shake, sound effects, and music, you definitely want to check out this video that you see over here. If you want to learn more about art asset pipelines that I mentioned before, you want to check this video that you see over here. So till next time, I'll see ya.